Howdy folks, today we are going to merge together art and science. We're going to use art to create a beautiful paper flower, and then we're going to use science to make that paper flower bloom. We're actually going to watch it as it slowly opens by itself, just like a blooming flower. Now, before we get going, let's talk about how this works. The reason that the flowers want to open themselves up when they get wet is because the water is filling all the tiny little spaces of air within the paper, and it's making the paper heavier. And when the paper in the petals gets heavier with water, it wants to fall back and sink into the water. Depending on the type of paper that you use and the number of petals that you put in your flower, it's going to bloom at a different speed. It's very interesting. To make your blooming paper flower, you will need a piece of paper. Any kind will work, but like I said, different types of paper will bloom at different speeds. I'm going to show you using this white piece of paper. And then the next thing you're going to need are two circle objects that you can lay on the paper to trace. One needs to be a bigger circle than the other. So I found this little bucket. I'm going to turn it upside down. I'm going to tuck it in the corner to save paper. And then I'm going to hold down the bucket while I trace around the sides to create a nice large circle. Cool. Now I'm going to find a slightly smaller circle. That means not a teeny tiny circle, just slightly smaller than the first one. And you're going to place whatever you find in the center of the first circle as best as you can guesstimate, and then hold it down while you trace that circle. Once you take it away, you will find yourself with two concentric circles. Concentric circles are two or more circles, one inside of the other, with the same matching center. A bullseye target is a perfect example of concentric circles. And around the middle smaller circle, we're going to draw a bunch of rainbows for the petals. Draw your rainbows tall enough so that they hit the outer circle. This way we know that all our petals are the same length. Depending on what you find out, the more petals or the fewer petals you add might change the speed at which the flower blooms when you put it in the water. I'm just going to do some medium-sized petals so that I end up with kind of a medium amount. But I don't want that little gap right there, so I'm going to have to erase and fix. I'm going to make this petal just a little bit skinnier. And now I can fit one in and close that gap. Sweet! Once you have a flower drawn, it's time to color it in. Color in the center, any colors you want, and then color in all the petals. After your flower is all colored in, it's time to grab a pair of scissors and cut it out. So grab your paper and your scissors, cut in from the edge of the paper until you hit the petals, and then use one hand to steer the paper left and right, use the other hand to cut, and get that flower cut out of that paper. Make sure that when you cut your petals that the cut goes all the way down to the center circle. So I'm going to make sure that all of my petals are going to be able to be bent or folded inward, and I'm going to double check that all the lines in between my petals have been cut down to the center circle. Now we're ready to make this flower bloom with some water. So find yourself a container of some kind that's big enough to hold the flower and fill it with just a little bit of water. You could use a bowl or a pan or even a plate works. You don't need very much water. And when you're ready and you've got your water, take one petal at a time and fold it in towards the center. Notice how I'm rotating or turning the flower every time I do a new petal. And once it's all folded up like this, it's time to test your flower experiment. Carefully and gently place your folded flower onto the water and watch it bloom. Again, depending on what type of paper you used and how thick it is, it might take longer or shorter for your flower to bloom. Just be patient, but you'll be able to see it happen right before your very eyes. It's super, super cool. I actually thought this was so cool that I made a bunch of different types of flowers, some with lots of petals, some with just a few petals, bigger flowers, smaller flowers. I tried new types of paper, and I folded them all up and kind of compared them all. And it's so interesting how the different things that I did to each flower and the different types of paper I used really changed how fast those flowers bloomed. Check it out. I hope you love making these blooming paper flowers, and I hope it inspires you to experiment and make lots of different types of them, with different types of paper, different numbers of petals, and different sizes to see which one blooms the best.